Cashflow Diary Podcast, episode 581.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Cashflow Diary Podcast, the podcast that teaches you insider tips, tactics, and strategies for creating leverage streams of cash flow into your life. Learn from top-performing entrepreneurs, business owners, investors, and thought leaders from across the globe as they share their secrets to success. Like what you learn on this and other Cashflow Diary podcast episodes? Go to learninvestingnow.com and sign up to receive powerful tips and information that will help you succeed as an entrepreneur and investor. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, educator, speaker, author, and master facilitator of Robert Kiyosaki's Cashflow game, Jay Massey.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Cashflow Diary Podcast. I'm your host, Jay Massey, and I'm glad that you are here today because we are going to talk about something that, well, I often believe houses some of the greatest opportunity. In fact, the reason my business, this podcast, and everything else that I have experienced in business exists is because of one simple concept. That concept is simply that where there is chaos, there's cash flow. As many of you know, we got started right around the time of 2008 when everything was falling apart. And today's guest is the founder and CEO of recession.com. I'm, of course, talking about Jonathan Slane. And here's what's interesting that I want you to remember. You and I have a lot of opportunity when things go awry. Here's what I mean. Jonathan spent the last Great Recession huddled in the fetal position on the floor of his office. Now, many of we've all experienced fear, right? And sometimes we can fear things like recessions. He borrowed $250,000 from his mother-in-law to survive. Now he's paid his mother-in-law back and now is here to help you and I figure out why we do not need to fear any recession ever. And what's exciting is that you and I, we're going to learn a lot of things about opportunity on this one. I'm excited to get into it. I hope you are ready to take some notes. So here's what I need you to do. I need to get ready to listen, love, and learn from Jonathan Slane. Jonathan, how you doing?
Doing great. Slane Dog here.
Yes, exactly. It's got to be awesome to have. There's so many things you can do with a last name like that. So that I think that's great. Now, before we go too far, I got to ask you the same question I tend to ask everybody else the first time that they're here. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. I tend to look at today's entrepreneurs a lot like yesterday's superheroes. You know, Batman, Superman, Wolverine, etc. Because I think entrepreneurs and superheroes have a ton of things in common. For example, if you think about Spider-Man, there was a time where he was just a kid going to school, doing his thing. And then one day, he gets bit by a spider, discovers that he's got a special superhuman ability, and now he's presented with a choice whether to use it for good or for evil. And entrepreneurship is just kind of like that. Because as an entrepreneur, I can envision myself, running around town, flying around town, using our products and services and saving customers one sale at a time. But also like a superhero, an entrepreneur has a beginning. So my question to you is as follows. There was a time when, before your books, before recession.com, before the last Great Recession, before you had to borrow money from your mother-in-law, before all of the things that we know you for today, what we want to know is, who is Jonathan Slane?
Yeah, big fan of the show. So I was listening to some episodes recently, and I knew this was coming.
Oh, man.
And yeah, so I was trying to think of something original, something nobody else on the show has said that I could somehow shoehorn into fitting my life. And I'm going to be honest with you, I keep coming back to just Batman. I think the similarities, I know that's not original, but for me, a lot of my life has always been in that cave doing a lot of preparation work. And so my setup, even my home office, looks similar, where there's an array of computer monitors surrounding me. And that's something I remember even as a kid when I was getting my first computer and had all those things around me, is just how do I always spend time preparing and doing the research so that I can then go on to be successful with whatever it is that I'm working on at the time. And I think that's been a superpower of mine, is that ability to turtle up and do my homework and do the research to get ready.
I like it. Okay. Well, okay. So, riddle me this then, Batman. How do we go from, there's just so, I'm tongue tied in a sense that I've got like more questions than I know. It's like, they're all important to me right now. And I want to know like everything, meaning when a Great Recession, as we call it, happens, one, there was a reason you needed to borrow $250,000. Two, there's a reason now that you were able to pay that back and able to change that. But before we even get to those things, there's a mindset underneath all of that I think every entrepreneur needs to hear and to understand. And I'm looking for the development process. The Jonathan that was in school doing homework to the Jonathan I'm talking to today has been on a journey. Share with us, if you will, a little bit about the beginnings of that.
That's Jay, you had like 17 nested questions there. So
I know. That's my problem right now. Is like I got all of these questions for you, and I'm just like, where are we gonna start? So right. Everywhere, but nowhere at the same time.
Yeah, the preparation has always been there. So going from high school through college, that's been a common thread, is the deep preparation work. And I'm reading a book right now called Deep Work that if the audience hasn't checked that out, I think it's a great representation of where we're at, because now as an entrepreneur, we're all so busy. We're all so busy answering emails. We're busy answering phone calls, trying to be productive, but we never have the time to do that actual deep work, to really think through what is it in the next recession that I can leverage as an opportunity. So what is it that I can think about now, that I can plan for, that when the opportunity of a downturn presents itself, I can leverage that to be able to skip past the line, to be able to hack the next recession. So I know a lot of what's popular right now in business media and entrepreneurship is grit and persistence. And if you just hustle enough, if you have 12 different jobs and you go from one to the other and you never sleep, then eventually you can have enough cash flow to be successful. But the message here is that what if there was a different and better way? What if we studied people that made a lot of money using recessions, using downturns as opportunities to skip that whole long waiting period? And so that's really a lot of what the message is, and a lot of what I learned from being so bad at preparing for the Great Recession. I mean, the reason I was huddled in the fetal position was because I was positioned in the worst possible industry. We were selling personal training. And so for the audience out there that's listening, I mean, of all the things that you can try to sell in a down economy, selling high-end personal training sessions has got to be about the worst. It's got to be up there with selling jewelry and selling cruise tickets. It doesn't get much worse. And so really it was figuring out what are the things that do really well in a recession. Where could we position ourselves so that in the next crash, we could actually crush the crash instead of getting crushed by it?
You know, what's interesting is here's something unique you have already done. You are the first person to even have the thought process of, like, when you said, what is it in the next recession that I can prepare for? I was thinking, one, that means you're expecting one. Most entrepreneurs, myself included, it's not something I consciously think about going, okay, the next recession is coming. let's make sure that we're ready. We don't think about that. We tend to think about opportunity, different feeling types of opportunities that are going in a completely different direction. But not only are you expecting the next year, there are multiple things, because if you're saying what is it in the next recession, that implies that there are going to be multiple ways to take advantage of the recession, even though you don't know when it is or how long it's going to be. I'm curious, how did, coming from personal training, how did you see these things?
Yeah, the honest answer, Jay, is that I'm actually a recovering investment banker. So that was a lot of where it comes from, is that I spent 2 years working 100 hours a week doing investment banking, looking at different companies, mergers and acquisitions, looking at economic indicators, looking at what makes companies grow, what makes them valuable, and studying that. So I've kind of been an economic geek for a while. And then my best friend, business partner, author, co-author, Paul Belair, who worked with me on the book Rock the Recession, Paul's also a super economic geek. So that's where a lot of it comes from. I think the more interesting answer to your question, though, is the entrepreneurs that are in your audience that are listening, we all always have a recession coming. Even if it's not an economic recession, I want you to just think through all the non-economic recessions that hit our businesses. So what if you lose your biggest customer? You're in a recession. What if your 5 best employees leave and they go across the street and start a competing business? That'll put you in a recession.
Wow.
And then, what if the government changes a regulation? So recently I'm watching the news, I'm seeing all the vaping crisis that's going on, and governments, local governments or state governments in the Northeast have all of a sudden suspended the sale of different vaping products, vape cartridges, CBD oil, has question marks on it. So if you're one of those companies, if you're an entrepreneur that got into the vaping market as a manufacturer or a retailer or wholesaler, all of a sudden your business is in a recession, because overnight that state legislature changed a law that now has directly impacted your revenue. Maybe your revenue went to zero. So do you have a plan for that next recession in your business, even if you don't agree with me that an economic recession is on the horizon? There's always a recession looming for us entrepreneurs. And my gig is just, I want to be prepared for the next one, because it was super painful the last time when I didn't have a plan, and then had to figure it out.
So you're actually hitting on something that's really important, and I hope all of the correct entrepreneurs are listening right now, because one of the things that is also happening, similar in the vaping, many of those that are listening right now, myself included, we operate in the short-term rental space. Traditionally what people call, Airbnb and using your properties that way. And we tend to leverage others and all this other stuff. That is absolutely happening in many different legislatures, where overnight it feels something strange suddenly happens to where what you were previously doing is now not the same. Either you can't do it, or you can't do it the way you used to do it, or you have to do it in a different way. How does one plan around what feels to be random ordinances and legislation that we can't influence or control?
Yeah, one of my the government changes has to do with single-use plastics. I know you're a California guy, so out in California, single-use plastics. All of a sudden the government said we're not going to allow single-use plastics in the future, and so now everybody doing water bottles has to figure out, can we go to aluminum cans? The people that sell the mini shampoos for hotels have to figure out, can we use dispensers? What does that look like? That wasn't an overnight thing, Jay. That's been working its way through the California legislature for a long time.
Well, but here's what I mean. Hold on. This is what I mean when I say overnight. Because you don't, everything doesn't pass, so to speak, is what I mean. So it's like, okay, this is something they're discussing. I can't theoretically or even physically prepare for every possible contingency that they're currently discussing. And I don't know what that thing is going. Yes, I can follow it all the way through and what the final version is going to look like. That's what I'm referring to. It's like, we don't really have to do anything or should, we don't know until it actually is a something. And then we've got to do something.
Yeah, well, there's going to be a couple lucky entrepreneurs that pick up on these trends, invest in them, and they have different products and services ready to go so that they're in the right place at the right time. And then all the rest of us are going to watch from the sidelines and then write off what they're doing as luck. But we as entrepreneurs, that's a lot of what we do, is we place smart bets in a lot of different areas, and there is a component of luck. But you've got to put yourself in the middle of the street if you're going to get run over by the lucky bus. So I think that a lot of it is looking at the different opportunities. Like, I'm thinking about your audience and a lot of what we do coming from short-term rentals and Airbnb, and seeing the huge deal that was just inked with the Olympics. So now, like, what are we going to do to get in front of that trend? We know that for the next, 8 years, we're going to be linked up with the Olympics. So in a recession, we need to think through recession. So there's been 11 recessions since World War II and in the United States, and they last on average 11 months. So 11 and 11, it's easy to remember. They don't come around super frequently. But when they do, they create a massive amount of disruption in a short amount of time. And that's where we have to be ready as entrepreneurs to jump in and somehow take advantage of the opportunities that brings to us. So if I'm in the short-term rental market, it's thinking through, in a recession, where are the markets in the country that people are going to need short-term rentals and want them? And maybe where are the vacation areas where I'm currently positioned that I don't think are going to fare very well in a recession? And those things I do think are possible for the audience to think through. And I don't know your market well enough to know, everybody should be moving towards Vegas and Scottsdale. Although I do know that all that demographic information is available. I do know that all of the data from the last recession is available. So people can start to do their homework and see where the market's going to go and be prepared for it. Or to be prepared if their current market had a recession of its own, agnostic of what's going on in the larger economy, what would you do? What is your plan to be able to survive or to thrive in a downturn?
Got it. And part of the challenge with the planning for the recession in the short-term rental world, at least from my perspective, is because I consider it more of an import-export business, because so much of our business comes from other countries that it's more important for me to know what's going on in Asia and the UAE, because that's where a lot of our customers come from, than it is the America, so to speak, because we get a significant amount of revenue from those countries in order to continue making the business go forward. When you say, though, that we as business owners shouldn't fear them, obviously, if we watch too much of the news, that's all we're going to do. But what is it that is there a better emotion? Should we be excited? Hey, I can't wait for the next recession. I mean, what do you think?
Well, I want the audience to look forward to the next recession. And so it's like, what can we do to position ourselves to make that happen? And not that I look forward to the massive displacement that many Americans will feel in a recession. And at the same time, I think as an entrepreneur, we should be getting ready for it. So it's thinking through, like, if you're talking about a lot of clientele being from Asia and the UAE, then what could the marketing look like if we were to dip into a recession? Could it be that, hey, now's a great time to come to the U.S. and visit because of currency imbalances that make it so that it's actually cheaper for you to come to the U.S.? Right. Could we market that since we're in a recession, it's actually a benefit to you and your currency coming from Asia or other places around the world? There's opportunities that will be had like that. It's just a question of can you spend a couple hours teeing up that marketing deck teeing up those ads or thinking through what that looks like so that when the recession hits, you can pounce on it instead of spending 2 weeks or the first 2 months of the recession trying to figure out how you're going to react. Because like I said earlier, they only last on average 11 months. The shortest one, 6 months. The longest one, the Great Recession, which was 18 months. And so you just need to be prepared to act to take advantage of everything that it's got to offer.
So earlier you mentioned that studying individuals who, did well during recessions. For those in the audience, who are some of those individuals that you think would make a perfect model?
Yeah, so one of them is Christy Hefner. So I interviewed Christy for the book, and she talks about how she was running the Playboy empire, and she's Hugh's daughter, or Hef's daughter. So in any case, talking through, though, how they were thinking at Playboy, because during the Great Recession, that was a while ago, back when there used to be newsstands, and they used to have copies of the actual magazine.
Right.
Right. So
what's
thinking through,
but
what's a magazine? But they understood that people would be going to the newsstand less, because in recessions, people tend to travel less, even going out on their daily routine, and they tend to spend less on discretionary items, which certainly a copy of Playboy is a discretionary item. So they boosted their investment in marketing because they knew that every dollar they spent on marketing would go further in a recession, because so many entrepreneurs, so many businesses pull back on marketing in a recession. That's the natural reaction, that there are less marketing dollars overall in the economy. And so every dollar you do spend, if you're Playboy, goes a lot further, has a much bigger ROI. So again, it's for the audience. Can we learn from that example? Can we actually plan to save some money now that we can spend on marketing dollars in a recession? Because we know that anything we buy in social media ads, in Google AdWords, in online, or even print, if that works for some of your audience in their markets, all those will go further. So that's one lesson that I love from the book.
Got it.
And then another one is just there's a company called Lithco that we talk about in the book, and they're a large contractor. They do a lot of concrete work, but really they saved up a big war chest going into the Great Recession, and then were able to buy a lot of other companies that were not prepared, that had bankruptcies, that had to go out of business, that did not have the balance sheet to support their business. So again, for your audience, it's thinking through, if we were to save up, then what are the properties that we could buy when other people aren't prepared? Or how could we arbitrage those opportunities if we had cash? Since we all know that, it's the Cashflow Diary, and it's about, if you've got cash, then you've got big opportunities. And if you don't, then you need to start thinking through what you can do now so that you actually are in a position of strength when the next recession hits. And the good news is that if the audience is listening to this pretty soon, I think we've got until at least middle or late 2020 until we're going to have an event. So there's still time to do something. There's still time to rock the recession instead of having it just rock you.
What's funny about you saying that, someone at church the other day was literally asking me, is this a good time to buy real estate, all that type of stuff? And I gave him my thoughts, and I said, you know what, I the one thing I do believe is you don't have to worry about anything until after we figure out this next election cycle. Then it's something, I don't know what, but something is likely to happen, and kind of go from there. With that being said, okay, so let's go with this idea of, we've got until late 2020. What is the number one thing? Is there, a number one thing? What could I do right now? Because I know there's someone who's driving, walking the dog, hoping, okay, Jonathan, I believe you. What do I do now?
Yeah, so the first step is to assess where you're at and to benchmark your recession readiness. And the plug is, the website is recession.com, If you go there, there's a 20-question survey called our Recession Readiness Assessment. It's free. We've had over 1,000 people go take it because I want to collect the data and understand how ready business owners and entrepreneurs are for a recession. But if you start with benchmarking, then you'll get your recession readiness score from 0 to 100, and you'll know how ready you are for the next recession. And you'll know which questions, which areas you need to focus on in order to start preparing. So first gear in our world is to just assess and figure out where you're at. If you take it and 0 is the worst and 100 is the best, and you score a 50, that means you're likely to have a painful time. You're likely to be borrowing money or crying in the corner like me in the next recession. If you score a 90, that means you should be looking forward to the next recession because you are ready to have it be an opportunity for you to grow the business. So first thing is to just get a baseline for where you're at. Understand it takes 5 or 10 minutes, and you can do that. And then the second gear from there, Jay, is that people need to tune up their business and their personal life to get ready for the next recession. And that tune up, it's like, what is your current level of debt? And what do you want to do about that before the next recession? How much of a line of credit do you have, whether it's a personal line or a business line of credit? Do you have enough available to support you in the worst of a recession? Or, more interestingly, do you have enough line of credit available if you have some great opportunities come your way so that you can take advantage of them? If you've got things like personal guarantee on any business debt that you have, now is a perfect time to see if you can get your bank to cap or eliminate your personal guarantee, because the economy is still strong. Banks will have that conversation with you right now. In a downturn, though, the bank's going to laugh at you if you try to reduce your personal guarantees. And nobody is thinking about this right now because it's been a decade since we've had a recession, and we're all just getting complacent. So nobody's thinking I should try to get my personal guarantee reduced, because I'm guessing a lot of the audience has also not owned their current business in the last recession. So a lot of these might be post-recession businesses where you got into short-term rentals in the last 1, 3, 5, even 7 years, and you've just never experienced it. So that's where we're trying to get people thinking through, can I benchmark where I'm at? Can I assess and tune up my situation? And then from there, they'll do things like race and prepare to accelerate in the next recession.
Well, you're 100% accurate. Anyone who's practicing short-term rentals was not. It's very unlikely, given the fact that Airbnb is not that old.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
It would be very impressive if someone had the business before then that wasn't working, in the more traditional sense. But there's something that you just said, and I want to kind of possibly play devil's advocate for a second. You mentioned lines of credit, etc. But if we look at what happened back in the 08s, one could make an argument that having a dependency or even thinking that credit as the potential resource, I can't count on that being there, can I?
Yeah, so if you have a line of credit, let's say it's $1 million to keep the numbers round,
sure,
and you're not drawing on it, so you haven't used any of it, you've just got $1 million in credit available, then as soon as you see on CNN and you see on Fox and CNBC that we're in a recession, you may draw that $1 million off your line of credit and put it into your checking account. You may put it at a different institution so that the bank can't claw it back. Because once you've drawn on the line of credit, that's your cash. You can keep that in the bank, and then you're just paying interest on the outstanding amount. And so that opportunity might help you to backstop your portfolio, or it might give you the opportunity to make purchases. I understand what you're saying, that the bank that originally issued you the line of credit may reduce it. Mm-hmm. They may say, you have this $1 million line, we're reducing it to 0, so as you pay it back, you can't redraw on it, so it's no longer a revolving line of credit. But that is an option for you. but it's only an option if you already have the line of credit available to you when we go into a recession. It will be very difficult for you to create a new line of credit once we're in a recession. And yeah, I mean, I understand that that's an aggressive tactic. I'm just trying to give the audience options that they can think through. And everybody's got to talk about it with their accountant, their financial advisor, etc. But it's something, if you're going to be prepared for a recession, you need to think about these things now, because these options don't exist once it's already all over the news and the economy starts to tip.
Totally understood. So if you could for a second, and it may be painful, but I'm curious, what are some of the common mistakes you've seen and witnessed now that other entrepreneurs have made? What are some of the mistakes that you made looking back that we could possibly prevent ourselves from doing?
Hello there, entrepreneur. This is Jay Massey. I know that if you've ever gone over to the site, cashflowdiary.com, you may have asked yourself, where on earth do you get a domain name from? Especially as you are beginning to build your bigger, better, badder business, you need a web presence. You need the email address. You need a way for people to contact you electronically so that you can stop doing the @gmail.com game. Well, the good folks over at GoDaddy have definitely supplied us with every domain that we have ever used. So what I want you to do is I want you to go over to trygodaddy.com/Cashflow Diary. Again, that's trygodaddy.com/Cashflow Diary, because it's a quick way for you to get set up to capture your domain name the exact way that you want it. They got easy search functions, and most importantly for you is that you'll be up and running today. As I said, once you get started, stay started. Don't let small little obstacles of how to get your own domain name going stop you. So again, go to trygodaddy.com/Cashflow Diary, and let's get back to the rest of the story.
Yeah, I'm always really trying to think of your specific audience and what would I be thinking. And I know a lot of the audience probably has a lot with Airbnb. So one of the big mistakes that I made was that my portfolio in the Great Recession was 5 personal training studios. And I owned 5 franchises, and that was it. That was my whole world. And so I was not diversified at all. And so if the audience has a lot of their portfolio, maybe even 100% are all Airbnbs, then what does that look like if there's a tectonic shock to Airbnb? What if there's a crisis with Airbnb? What if there's a scandal? What if there's a WeWork type of crisis? I mean, so there's a lot of exposure there. And it's whether or not we have a recession in the economy, it's just thinking through, what if Airbnb has a recession? What if there's a scandal with the Olympics? So I think for me, one of the biggest lessons is to think through both geographic and industry diversity to make sure that you're balanced and positioned, and that you've got a hedge. So for me, one of the things is that I do consulting for large companies, and it's really on how they can do strategic planning for the future. And that business is going great right now. I really can't complain. Very thankful for all the good fortune on that front. And I know that in a downturn, high-paid consultants are probably one of the first things that are going to get fired. And so this recession business is actually a good hedge, because as the country moves into a recession, I think that all the speaking that I'm doing on how to rock the recession, the book, the workbooks that we offer, all that business will increase, even if my consulting business decreases. So for the audience, like, as we look at our portfolio, what is that hedge that we can build in now? I want to do it in the cool, rational light of day. I don't want to do it in the emotional heat of the night when all of a sudden nobody's renting my properties and everybody on the news is, we're in a recession, we don't know when we're going to come out of it, and people start to turtle up and freak out, and the Asian market gets worried about traveling to the U.S., or the president makes it tougher for some reason for people to travel in and out of the country. Whatever all those reasons might be, that's what I'm thinking about, and trying to diversify instead of just getting caught again without having a plan B, without having an emergency brake. I think that's the big one. And we discuss in the book, it's like you need an emergency brake, because if all this stuff, if you're listening to me right now and, you know, I know maybe the audience, some people out there are rolling their eyes at some of this, like, you know, I don't believe there's going to be a recession, or even if there is, I don't think we'll be able to take advantage of it. You need to have an emergency brake. You need to know your limit so that you don't just keep borrowing. I mean, you talked about that in the intro. Like I borrowed $250,000 from my mother-in-law to survive the Great Recession. And that's absolutely true. And Jay, the worst part about it, man, is that I didn't borrow it all at once. I borrowed it $20,000 at a time.
Oh my goodness.
Every 2 weeks, because that was how much my payroll was.
Wow.
And I didn't have an emergency brake. I didn't have a plan. So there was never a time when it was like, if I got to 100,000, I was just going to cut it off and bankrupt the business and start over. I didn't have that. So I think that was another huge mistake, is that I didn't set those limits before it was a crisis. And so all of my decisions were emotional, and that left me in a tough spot. And I'm, you know, thankful. I'm actually, I'm excited because I'm recording with you from my mother-in-law's office. I'm actually down in her house for the holidays, which is cool because I've never had this opportunity before. And it's cool now because I paid her back.
Right.
Right. But yes, that's what I'm thinking. Those are some of the big mistakes.
Got it. Yeah, this would be a completely different conversation if like she was standing over your shoulder right now, huh?
Oh, dude, I'd be whispering.
Yeah, totally understood. So you mentioned something though, and I want to see if I'm understanding what you're calling diversification, in as specifically as it relates to short-term rentals, because one of the things that we've instructed all of our students, and we practice ourselves, is we definitely make sure that our new business comes from channels other than, say, Airbnb, because there's obviously your booking.com, as well as HomeAway and many others. Are you saying when you're using like the concept of Airbnb, are you saying Airbnb specifically, or are you saying any of the, say, OTAs where we would actually acquire, you know, customers from? Like if that entire thing went down, what else are we going to do? Or are you saying if that one particular source of customers went down, what are you going to do?
I think that one particular source is where my head is at. I don't think that this industry will go away in a recession. So I'm not saying that you have to be also own a bakery as well as doing short term. I think it's really, but the biggies are that you need to check your vendors. And so if you're just with one of those portals that you talked about, then I would be thinking about diversifying to 2 or 3 in case one of them has a scandal, one of them has a balance sheet issue, or one of them gets acquired, and for some reason, what if one of them just changes their fee structure and you're completely beholden? Then what does that look like?
Yeah.
All of a sudden you're in a recession, you're scrambling to figure out what you're going to do. And so that's one piece. The second is geographic diversity.
Yep.
And so thinking through, do I want to be in multiple markets? And I understand that has challenges, but so does everything in business. And then the last one is, are there different industry categories that I can serve? So is all of my business vacation goers? Is there some business rental, stuff that I can do because those markets maybe hedge each other? Are there short-term rentals for people that are displaced from their other home because maybe they lost their other home and now they need some sort of short-term housing? Because in a recession, we know that happens to a lot of people. So if you're not doing some of those classes of short-term rentals, then what does that look like? Or could you somehow leverage your short-term experience into medium-term or longer-term rentals? Since I know that the demographics in this country are going more towards rentals as opposed to mortgages. And so I love those things where it's a demographic trend, where I know that millennials prefer to buy homes later. How can I take advantage of that if I'm in the business that most of your audience is in?
You know, Jonathan, I got to confess something right now. I thought I was going to feel a little bit more sad or discouraged when talking about recession so much, but right now I'm really excited listening to what you're saying. Mostly because a lot of what you're saying is exactly what we did, but I didn't do it for these reasons. I was just doing it because, I didn't want to have a single point of failure. That's how I usually call it. And I was scared of depending on any one customer demographic for business. So what are some of the things that you have seen, I guess, either as a consultant or in the process of, working with so many companies, that is there any, well, let me say it this way. Is there something, because if you're looking at a big company, that's one thing, but when we're talking the smaller companies, is there something that we're more vulnerable to than them? And if so, what that might be?
It has to come back to the balance sheet as the number one vulnerability for small businesses, for entrepreneurs, for if you're doing less than $1 million a year in revenue for your small business, then I think you're most likely in the bucket of what is that balance sheet? How many months of operating expenses do you have if your business hit the skids or stopped? What is your ability to protect the golden goose? And if you're wondering right now, you're the golden goose, and to just survive, to make sure that that you make it through the next recession. So if you want the depressing part of the story, have your plan. So if you're used to on a monthly basis bringing in $40,000 in rental income, then start to do that emergency brake. So if you saw your rental income decreasing to $30,000 a month, what expenses would you cut to make sure that you break even or maintain profitability? If you're used to bringing in $40,000 a month in rental income and it goes to $20,000, what would you cut to make sure that you can still stay afloat? I mean, I'm using big and round numbers, but I think for the audience, it's thinking through, what is my plan? Maybe that I've got a management company. It may be that I take that back and now I'm doing my own management for these properties. It may be that I'm taking salary and distributions and I'm going to have to cut my salary and distributions. It's much better to have that conversation with yourself and with your spouse now, as opposed to when we're actually in the recession. And then maybe you're going to increase your marketing because you listened to Slain Dog today on this podcast. And you heard that marketing is one of those things where you get an even bigger ROI in a recession. And so maybe you're going to be crazy and even bump up your marketing budget. Again, I want you to plan for those things now, because in a recession, I want you to already have it written down so that you can hold yourself accountable, because it is very tough to spend more on marketing when we're in the throes of a recession. The whole world is going to be telling you not to. Your gut's going to be telling you not to. And you're going to have to go back to those words that you wrote down and promised yourself, because you're going to want to take advantage of the opportunities, even though it's painful. So those are the big vulnerabilities for small business. And then on the positive side, Jay, I think it's thinking through, what are the niches that you can exploit that the big boys, the bigger businesses can't exploit? So what are those small niches, those pockets of opportunity that you can go into in the short-term market that really will be beneficial? And I don't have a specific niche recommendation, but one example that I was just reading about is that in the Great Recession, veterinary clinics did great. People still spent money on taking their dog or their cat to get treatment at the vet. Even if we were in a recession, people will put that on their credit card. And so if you're an entrepreneur and you can somehow serve the veterinary clinic market, I love that business, because I don't think people really think through that will be pretty well protected in a recession, because people will still spend money on their pets. I want the audience thinking through in their everyday lives, what are those small opportunities? How can I somehow leverage those? Because we know that there are certain things in a recession that will carry on, like grocery stores. are going to get a boost in a recession because people eat out less. So how can you think through what you're doing that will allow you to just take advantage of some of those natural trends?
Interesting. I didn't know that about veterinary clinics at all, and definitely would have never thought that that was the case. And it's funny when you said people eat out less. Instantly, what came to my mind was it makes me wonder if like DoorDash and Uber Eats and all the places where you can just order food are thinking about things like that at this particular moment in time. Anyway, this is. Man, I know that you and we can keep going for quite a while because I've got a lot of comments and thoughts on this because this is so counterintuitive. But for those that have listened this far and want to find out more about what you got going on, maybe pick up a copy of the book, or, get started on figuring out their plan. What's going to be the best way for them to catch up with you?
The book is on Amazon.com. It's just Rock the Recession. My information is all on recession.com, and yes, that really is my website. They can get all my contact info there. They can go take that free recession readiness assessment. They can pick up a copy of the workbook on there if they want to. But yeah, all my details are there.
Excellent. And then as we wind down, I've kind of got a final question for you because see, there's possibly someone right now in the audience who maybe they're thinking to themselves, I'll just wait till the recession is over before I even start the business or something of that nature, or they're at what I like to call the precipice of the decision, meaning they were in one spot when this conversation started and they were listening, and now they're at another. They're ready to do something. They're making a decision, and one of those decisions could even be, well, I'm going to wait and postpone. But like I know, that as humans, when we get to these points, often we hesitate because we have a companion. That companion comes in the form of a voice, and it reminds us of how it didn't work last time. And oh my gosh, you're actually going to make money at a recession? Seriously? You're going to be prepared? That's not going to work. And for some people, they're related to that voice. So my question to you is as follows. Let's pretend that this time they're going to follow through, and they're going to do so in the next 24 to 48 hours. What would you suggest that they do?
First thing is doing the assessment. Again, I always have to pivot back to that to just know where I stand and what the things are that I want to focus on, because that's the most tactical thing that you can do when it comes to recession planning, is to start with benchmarking. It's something, I didn't make it up. It's something that, as I talk to countless CEOs of companies, and I talk to entrepreneurs that were successful at using the recession as fuel for them to have massive growth. It's where they start, and so why reinvent the wheel? So that would be the first tactical starting point, Jay. And then as a lifelong entrepreneur myself, my last and only boss when I was investment banking told me a long time ago that I was too much of a pain in the ass to work for anybody anyways. And so from there, it's just been a choice with higher highs and lower lows for me, all the way from fetal position in the corner of the office to right now, just being lucky enough to have that opportunity to be on TV with Fox or on TV with Cheddar. And looking back, I think a lot of it was just getting started, taking the plunge. So hopefully the audience that's stuck with us this far just takes the plunge. If you want to be checking out the recession stuff and leveraging that, that's at recession.com. But really appreciate everything you're doing here to help entrepreneurs get started, especially cash flow, because that's really that's the lifeblood of all the businesses that we have.
100%. I definitely thank you for taking what many experienced as a negative and finding the positive within it, and then being willing to share that information. Because
dude, Jay, I'm on a mission, man. Nobody should have to borrow money from their mother-in-law.
Completely understood. You are protecting families. That is what you are about. I love it. I 100% understand, because I can only imagine what Thanksgiving was like during that time. Nonetheless, I'm glad that you are out there. I'm glad that you're doing what you're doing. And I just want to be one of the first to say thanks for taking the time to share your knowledge, wisdom, and insight here with us today at the Cashflow Diary.
All right, Jay, rock on.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you know what time it is. It's time for you to move at the speed of instruction. What does that mean? That means get over to recession.com. When? Now. Why? Because one, you know, no matter what business you're in right now, you know that you do not know if you are ready. So the worst thing you could do is nothing right now, because now you have absolutely no excuse. You have an opportunity to at least make sure that you are now aware of what you could have done and could do now that you have time. So when should you do it? Absolutely now o'clock. I'm glad that you guys listened. I'm hoping that you are in the process of typing the words recession.com inside your browser in another window somewhere, because at the end of the day, if you're not around, if your business isn't here, it can't do any good. It can't bring your family what you intended it to bring in the first place. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been fun talking to you guys today. I look forward to talking to you soon. Until next time.